The humans are invincible. The day the fleets arrived, the galaxy expected another war of attrition. That was how it always started, with a flash of light on the outer rim, signals lost from distant worlds, and a message that promised surrender or annihilation. It was a pattern older than most of the stars in the sky, a rhythm the universe had come to expect. But this time, things were different. This time, it wasn't a marauding fleet of mercenaries, or a war machine sent by some alien empire that made contact. It was humanity. No one knew much about the humans, other than they were new to the stars. A primitive species that had, until recently, been confined to a single solar system, tucked away in a quiet corner of the Milky Way. They had only been encountered a handful of times by traders and explorers, with reports of curious but harmless creatures just starting to grasp the basics of space travel. So when the armada of gleaming human warships arrived at the edge of the Galactic core, their message broadcast on every frequency, the major powers of the galaxy were confused. Confusion soon turned to disbelief when the message was translated. We are here to liberate the galaxy. We are humanity, and we are invincible. It would have been laughable if not for the swiftness of their advance. The first stronghold fell in a matter of hours, its ancient defenses, unbroken for millennia, turned to molten slag by human weapons the galaxy had never seen before. The invaders moved with a precision that spoke of unshakable confidence, of a strength that defied reason. The reports from the front lines were the stuff of legends, the kind of stories civilizations would tell for generations. Human ships refusing to be disabled by energy weapons that had once turned entire war fleets to scrap. Ground troops that shrugged off kinetic blasts that would have vaporized lesser beings. Their battlesuits glowed with a strange azure light, and it was said that they could move as fast as thought and strike with the force of a falling star. And when a human soldier fell, crushed by a collapsing tower, vaporized in a plasma blast, he would stand up again, armor and flesh knitting back together as if time itself bent to their will. At first, the rumors seemed too absurd to believe, dismissed as exaggerations born of fear and desperation. But the evidence piled up. Security footage, intercepted transmissions, and even testimonies from defectors all pointed to the same impossible truth. Humanity was advancing, and nothing, not the oldest empires, nor the deadliest weapons, nor the most impenetrable defenses, could stop them. In the end, the galaxy's greatest minds could only agree on one thing. The humans had found something that made them unstoppable. The only question that remained was what exactly that was. And deep within the bridge of a warship larger than a city, Admiral Marcus Blake stood before a screen, his eyes reflecting the distant stars. He knew what they had found. He knew why humanity had become what they were, invincible. With a grim smile, he issued the next set of orders. The galaxy would learn. They would all learn. But the truth, he knew, was simpler than anyone would believe. Humanity had always been invincible. They just hadn't realized it yet. The warships pushed deeper into the galactic core, spreading like an unstoppable tide. Entire star systems fell within days, surrendering to the humans without a single shot fired. The few that resisted were crushed with such efficiency that word of the humans' victories spread faster than the fleets themselves. Fear turned to panic as leaders of the oldest empires called emergency meetings, sending their greatest minds to decipher what made the humans so unassailable. But there were no answers, only more questions. On the bridge of his command ship, Admiral Blake watched as the Empire of Thalvera, the galaxy's oldest and most powerful, collapsed into chaos. Their grand citadel, a fortress said to be impenetrable, had fallen in a single night. The humans had not even fired a weapon. They had simply walked through the walls. Their enemies' defenses had disintegrated before them, as if reality itself was bending to their will. Blake's second-in-command, Commander Ives, approached, her expression tight with barely contained awe. "Another system has sent their surrender, sir. They're asking for terms." Blake didn't respond immediately, his gaze locked on the fractured remains of Thalvira's fleet, now drifting in the vacuum like scattered leaves caught in the wind. "Tell them the same thing we told the others," he said finally. "Submit to humanity's guidance, or face the consequences. The choice is theirs." Ives nodded, but hesitated before turning away. "Sir, the rumors about our soldiers, about what's happening on the ground." "Forget the rumors," Blake cut her off, his voice hard. "We don't have time for speculation. We have a galaxy to save." Ives opened her mouth as if to argue, but thought better of it. She saluted sharply and retreated, her footsteps echoing across the steel floor. Blake sighed and leaned forward, the cold light of the console casting harsh shadows across his face. He knew what the rumors said, that humanity's soldiers were unkillable, that they had mastered some form of regeneration technology far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen, that some had even seen them walking through solid walls, moving faster than light itself. But the truth was far stranger. Blake knew because he had seen it himself, soldiers taking plasma bolts to the chest, only to rise moments later, the wounds sealing themselves as if they had never been. He had seen weapons fail, defenses crumble, and time seem to twist and slow around them, all with no visible explanation. The briefing room behind the bridge was dimly lit, the air thick with tension as the high-ranking officers of the fleet gathered. Blake strode in, his face a mask of calm, and they fell silent. He tapped a command on his wrist, and a holographic display flared to life above the table. A planet, surrounded by a defensive grid of satellites and battle stations. "Draca Prime," he said, the name ringing through the room. "The seat of power for the Union of Suns. It's our next target." There were murmurs of disbelief. Draca Prime was the heart of the galaxy's military might, a fortress world with defenses that rivaled the core worlds of the Thalvira. Yet Blake's voice was steady, his certainty unshaken. "We'll strike in 3 days," he continued, ignoring the uncertain glances. "This time, they'll be ready for us, but it won't make a difference. They think they know what they're facing, but they don't. Not yet." One of the admirals, a grizzled veteran with cybernetic implants, spoke up. "Admiral Blake, the fleet's spread thin. Our supply lines are strained, and the galaxy's starting to unite against us. We should regroup, reinforce." Blake's eyes burned with an intensity that silenced the room. "No," he said. "We press on. We can't afford to stop now. The moment we hesitate, we lose our advantage. We'll hit Draca Prime like we've hit everything else, with speed and precision. And when they realize the truth, it'll be too late." The lights in the room flickered as if responding to the tension. Blake felt it too. The weight of the choices he had made, the burden of the secrets he kept. He had to succeed. For the first time in history, humanity had the chance to reshape the galaxy, to bring order to a universe that had been fractured by centuries of war. He turned off the hologram and faced his officers. "We are humanity," he said, his voice echoing with a quiet, unbreakable conviction. "And we are invincible." As the officers filed out, Blake remained behind, staring out at the endless sea of stars. Somewhere out there, deep in the void, lay the source of humanity's strength, a secret that had made them unbreakable. He could feel it, like a pulse in the fabric of the universe, calling to him. And he knew that whatever happened on Draca Prime, whatever the galaxy threw at them, humanity would not falter. They couldn't. Because there was something different about them now, something no one else had. The attack on Draca Prime began with silence, a suffocating, endless silence that stretched across the void between the human fleet and the fortified planet. Every ship in Admiral Blake's armada drifted quietly through the cold expanse of space, their engines dormant, their weapons cold. Only the faint hum of energy shields flickered in the distance, a delicate pulse of azure light. Then, without warning, the void erupted. The defensive grid around Draca Prime blazed to life, thousands of automated turrets and orbital cannons releasing a storm of plasma fire that filled the darkness with bursts of blinding light. Shields flared, flares burst, and the human fleet surged forward as if answering a challenge. Admiral Blake stood motionless at the center of his flagship's command deck, watching the planet's defenses spring into action. It was a beautiful, terrible sight, alien technology unleashed in a desperate attempt to stop the unstoppable. He felt the vibrations as the first impacts struck the ship's shields, the thrum of energy rippling through the hull. "Commander Ives," he said, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "Begin the assault." "Yes, Admiral," Ives responded, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Engaging Phase 1. The fleet moved as one. Sleek, black ships shot forward, forming a perfect formation around Blake's flagship, their weapons charging with a low hum that sent shivers down the spine. Beams of light, brilliant and unwavering, sliced through space, targeting the defensive grid with pinpoint accuracy. Turrets exploded in showers of metal and flame, orbital stations shattered, and the azure shields of the human ships absorbed the retaliatory fire with ease. The battle seemed to defy the laws of physics, with the humans maneuvering faster than their enemies could react, phasing in and out of sensor readings, appearing where they should not be. It was as if the fleet danced to a rhythm no one else could hear, every ship in perfect synchronization, a symphony of destruction. In the war room beneath the surface of Drakkar Prime, General Ralkoth watched the holofeeds with mounting horror. His people had prepared for every possible scenario, had anticipated every tactic, every stratagem the humans might use. But they had never expected this. He had never seen anything like it. Ships dodging beams of light with impossible precision, intercepting projectiles as if they knew where they would be fired before they left the barrel. "Deploy the doomsday cannons," Ralkoth barked, his voice cracking. "All of them, now!" Above him, in orbit, the planet's final line of defense roared to life. Massive, ancient cannons, buried in the planet's surface for millennia, emerged from hidden vaults, each one as large as a city, their barrels glowing with the light of 100 suns as they charged. It was the last, desperate play of a cornered empire, a weapon of unimaginable power, capable of tearing apart moons. Blake saw the readings on his console, felt the shift in the enemy's strategy, and smiled. "Right on schedule," he said softly. "Activate the Entropy Engines." "Engaging," Ives replied, her voice tense but steady. There was a sudden, almost imperceptible shift in the air, and for a brief moment, the stars seemed to dim. A ripple spread from the core of the human fleet, a wave of distortion that bent the light around it, warping space and time itself. The cannons fired, their blasts burning a path through the cosmos, each one a torrent of raw, concentrated energy that could turn a fleet to ash. And then, the beams vanished. They didn't stop. They didn't impact. They simply ceased to exist, as if swallowed by the very fabric of reality. "Impossible," Ralkoth whispered, his eyes widening with disbelief. The doomsday cannons, the pride of his people, their ultimate weapon, rendered useless by a force he couldn't understand. Blake's fleet moved forward without pause, the entropy engines distorting the space around them, bending enemy fire away, as if reality itself was a shield in humanity's hands. The fleet pressed closer, and Blake knew the time had come. "Phase 2, he said, his voice cold and unyielding. The ships accelerated, dropping out of formation, diving toward the planet's surface with breathtaking speed. They cut through the atmosphere like knives, plasma shields glowing with an unearthly light as they descended. The capital cities of Drakkar Prime lay below, their spires glimmering in the shadows of the descending fleet. The humans didn't slow, didn't falter. The first ship landed, a colossal impact that shook the ground for miles around. Soldiers poured out, their armor glowing with the same ethereal light as the entropy engines, their movements a blur. Plasma bolts struck them, missiles detonated at their feet, and none of it mattered. They moved through the carnage untouched, shields deflecting everything that came their way. Within hours, the capital was under human control. As the fires of Drakkar Prime's brief resistance smoldered, the shockwaves rippled across the galaxy. The Union of Suns was defeated, their final bastion reduced to ash, their most powerful weapon neutralized by a force they could not comprehend. And the message spread like wildfire. Humanity is unstoppable. Yet in the silent corridors of Blake's flagship, there was no celebration. The crew moved with the calm efficiency of those who knew their work was not yet done. Repairs were made, orders were given, and the fleet regrouped, preparing for the next phase of conquest. But something had changed in the Admiral's eyes, a flicker of doubt, of uncertainty, as if he knew the cost of what they had just accomplished. In his private quarters, Blake sat at a small, worn desk, one of the few relics he had brought with him from Earth. A map of the galaxy floated above him in holographic light, pulsing softly as new territories fell under human control. But his attention was elsewhere, focused on a small steel cylinder that lay in his hand. He turned it over and over, feeling the weight of it, the coolness of the metal against his skin. There was a knock at the door. "Enter," he said, slipping the cylinder back into his pocket. Commander Ives stepped inside, her face set in a mask of professionalism, but he could see the strain around her eyes. "The planet is secure, sir. We've rounded up the Union's leaders. They're asking to speak with you." Blake's gaze remained on the star map. "They want to know why," he said softly. "Why they lost. Why we're here. They're not the first, and they won't be the last. Should I refuse them?" "No," Blake said, standing. "I'll see them." The room they had chosen for the meeting was cold and sterile, a far cry from the grandeur of Drakkar Prime's once glorious capital. The captured leaders, once proud and powerful, were shackled to the floor, their eyes burning with a mixture of fury and fear. General Ralkoth, still wearing the charred remnants of his uniform, glared at Blake with the hatred of a defeated warrior. Blake entered quietly, his expression calm and detached. He moved to the center of the room, facing the broken leaders of a fallen empire. For a moment there was only silence, the weight of unspoken questions hanging in the air like a suffocating cloud. "What are you?" Ralkoth spat finally, his voice thick with desperation. "What have you done? No one is this powerful. No technology can do what you did. What are you?" Blake's eyes were dark and unreadable. He had heard the question before, from the mouths of dying men, from the lips of desperate leaders who watched their worlds crumble before them. The answer was always the same. But now, something inside him twisted. "We are human," he said, the words a familiar mantra. "We are invincible." Ralkoth's eyes narrowed, his fury giving way to disbelief. "No," he said, shaking his head. "That's not an answer. You can't be. There's no species, no army that can do what you've done. You walked through our strongest shields. Your soldiers didn't fall, even when we unleashed our full power. What have you found? What makes you invincible?" Blake hesitated, his gaze flickering to the walls as if searching for some unseen witness. The truth lay on the tip of his tongue, but he knew he could not speak it. Not here, not now. It was a truth that, if known, would shake the very foundations of everything the galaxy believed. A secret that not even his closest officers knew. "We have something you don't," he said finally, his voice cold and firm. "We have the will to do what must be done. We have the strength to face the dark and make it ours. And we have each other." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Ralkoth's expression twisted into a snarl. "Lies," he said. "You found something. A power, a technology, something beyond any empire's reach. What is it? Tell me." Blake said nothing, and the silence grew heavy. He saw the panic in the alien's eyes, the desperation of a defeated man who needed to understand, who needed to believe that what had happened could be explained. But Blake knew there were no explanations. not ones that Ralkoth would accept. The meeting ended without ceremony. The leaders of the Union were led away, their fate sealed, and Blake returned to the bridge with a heaviness in his chest. Outside the viewport, Drakkar Prime's scarred surface slowly rotated, a grim reminder of what had been lost. "Admiral," Ives said quietly as he stepped onto the bridge, "our scouts have intercepted a transmission, a coded message sent from the core worlds of the Xyrr Dominion. It's an emergency broadcast, requesting a summit of all remaining powers. They're rallying, sir. The galaxy is uniting against us." The journey to the Xyrr Core was filled with an eerie calm, a silence that felt unnatural after the brutal conquest of Drakkar Prime. The human fleet moved swiftly, without challenge, through systems that had once belonged to the Union of Suns. Every world they passed lay abandoned or burned, their populations having fled or surrendered to the inevitable wave of human domination. Admiral Blake stood on the bridge, his eyes locked on the star map as the Xyrr Core approached. The final stronghold, the last alliance of species that dared to defy the human empire. Every species that had not yet fallen had come together, pooling their knowledge, resources, and technology to make one final stand. They knew the humans were coming, and they had prepared for it. And yet, Blake could not shake the feeling that something was different this time. He felt the tension in his crew, saw the apprehension in Commander Ives' eyes as she relayed status reports. This battle was not like the others. It was not just another victory. It was the endgame, the last fight that would determine the future of the galaxy. "Admiral, we're approaching the Xyrr Core," Ives said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Scanners are picking up massive energy signatures, larger than anything we've seen before." Blake's jaw tightened. "Prepare the fleet. All ships to battle readiness." The fleet slowed as it reached the edge of the Xyrr system, drifting into a vast, empty stretch of space that seemed too quiet, too empty. And then, in a flash, the void filled with light. The combined might of the galaxy's remaining powers appeared, as if from nowhere. Hundreds of ships, each one different from the next, a chaotic yet beautiful display of alien design and ingenuity. Massive battle cruisers flanked by nimble fighters, dreadnoughts surrounded by swarms of drones, sleek interceptors darting between colossal carrier ships. They had gathered everything they had, everything they were, for this one final stand. "Full scan," Blake ordered. "I want to know what we're up against." As the scans filled his screen, he saw it. A structure at the heart of the Xyrr Core, vast and ancient, a ring-like construct of alien origin that dwarfed any ship in the fleet. It pulsed with a strange, shimmering energy, unlike anything the humans had seen before. It was the Alliance's final weapon, a device built to defy humanity's reign. "It's a reality anchor," Ives said, her voice tight with awe and fear. "They've built something to counter our technology, to stop the Entropy Engines." Blake's gaze remained steady. "All ships, advance," he said, his voice cold and resolute. "We take the anchor, we break their last defense." The fleet surged forward, and the battle began with a fury that made Drakkar Prime seem like a skirmish. Plasma beams and laser fire crisscrossed the void, ships exploded in blinding bursts of light, and the Xyrr Core became a maelstrom of death and destruction. The humans fought with their usual precision, moving with impossible speed, their ships dancing through the chaos as if they were guided by unseen hands. But the Alliance had prepared well. Their reality anchor pulsed with an unearthly light, and as it did, the Entropy Engines began to fail. The human fleet hesitated, their formations breaking as the strange energy from the anchor disrupted their advanced systems. For the first time, humanity was thrown off balance. "Admiral, our shields are destabilizing!" Ives shouted, panic in her voice. "We're losing control of the engines!" Blake's eyes narrowed. He had known this moment would come, had known that they would face something they couldn't predict, couldn't control. He had prepared for it. "Activate the override," he said quietly. Ives froze, her eyes wide. But sir, the override, it will... Do it, Blake said, his voice unyielding. We end this here. She hesitated, then nodded, her hands moving over the console. There was a moment of stillness, a deep, aching silence that filled the bridge, and then the override activated. The human fleet shimmered, the Entropy Engines pulsing with a furious, chaotic light. They had been pushed to their limit, and the override unleashed their full potential, tearing open the very fabric of space and time around them. The reality anchor flared in response, its energy colliding with the unleashed power of the Entropy Engines, creating a storm of raw, uncontrolled force. The battlefield became a nightmare, a place where physics ceased to make sense, where ships phased in and out of existence, where time itself seemed to warp and twist. The Alliance ships fought valiantly, pouring everything they had into the battle, but they were no match for the unleashed fury of humanity. One by one, they fell, their shields failing, their weapons shattered.